Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates. With your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And today I have a special guest on, Kim Kredich. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So I brought Kim on because she's friends with Jody and Michael, and you're going to be the next episode after them. And you guys are neighbors and friends, and you have some things in common. And you're an autism mom, obviously. That's who we always have on the show. So let's tell your story.
Well, we've got sort of an interesting story because my husband had testicular cancer when he was 19 before we ever met. And so our best shot at having kids was through in vitro, our own kids. But just that was the best shot for us, and it was the fifth try that was the winner. So we did this over 2 years, and it was pretty devastating each time. It didn't work, and then finally, I think sort of technology caught up with us, and we were very careful to take time in between each try, whereas people sometimes just go bam, bam, bam. We always took 6 months or so between each try to count our blessings, reset, and then give it another go. And so fifth time was a charm in 1998. And so the twins, Ben and Miles, were born in 1999, March 13th. And they were 6 weeks early, but that's pretty normal for twins. Yeah, I mean, I was not the cute pregnant lady that parenting is so humbling, right? Because you have these preconceived notions of dancing with a cute belly through daisies. And instead I had acne everywhere, and I was throwing up all the time. And I was really beast looking because I looked like an aircraft carrier, honestly. But
okay, so let's talk about the twins. So they were 6 weeks premature, but like you said, that's kind of normal. I had twins also. They were born 4 weeks premature, but they were fine. How was their development growing up? Was it on time?
Well, that's the funny thing, because you've got twins, and Ben, who was then later diagnosed with autism, he could label everything, and then Miles, who ended up he was diagnosed with possible verbal apraxia, but it was just a late talker. His brain was kind of doing different things, he could balance anything, and he ended up going to art school and is now gainfully employed in the art and music world. So we had these two different kids, and they were our first kids, and so one could spell and spell backwards. That was Ben, who ended up being diagnosed age 2.5 with autism. But then Miles was such a late talker. Honestly, we were kind of a little bit more worried about Miles than anything, because he had 5 sounds when he was 2.5. And Ben was like bird, waffle, egg, and could just do anything with spelling, and knew all his letters and numbers just so early on. And so that's we had an odd beginning. The third kid, of course, met his milestones just at least a week early, thank goodness, because we got the 2 diagnoses, one with Miles' possible verbal apraxia and Ben with autism, right when we moved from Providence, Rhode Island to Richmond, Virginia. And we just moved there, and Coleman was 3 months old, and I was breastfeeding, and that's when we got these diagnoses, and I'm just looking down at him going, oh my gosh, what do you have? So it was a little different, but that kind of set the stage for life's discoveries and whatnot, ups and downs. So it was interesting. Our road to inclusion kind of was because.
Well, hold on. How did we get the autism diagnosis?
Oh, well, both of Matt's parents, who have since passed away, brilliant doctors, and his mom was the leading pediatric rheumatologist for lupus at Duke University. So, I mean, we had great medical sort of advice, and she sort of said, hey, you might want to get both of them checked out. And, other people are like, oh, they're just boys, they develop differently. But we did. We got them checked out at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville just 3 months after we had moved to Richmond. And both boys had been in early intervention for speech, and then, sensory integration dysfunction. So we were already in the speech and OT, but everybody said, "Oh no, Ben doesn't have autism. He's too loving," and he was like cuddly and funny, and we've got the videos to prove it. And so then, though, once we moved, that was right around the 2.5 year mark, and he just started really repeating things, kind of, watch again, like we couldn't watch something without sniffing or something, and he'd sort of freak out. So we did take them both, and that was August 14th, 2001. It was
The exact date. Wow.
that was D-Day. We call it D-Day, right? Like that, we got 2 diagnoses, and but the one for autism was obviously, and at 12:30, the guy who saw him at 12:30 said he's totally fine, and then by 4:30 he had autism, and it's like, well, right, because he could play with trains normally. He's watching him play with trains, and so it's just, you know, a roller coaster right when we had moved there, right when Matt had gotten a new job from Brown University to University of Richmond, and I was always going to stay home with the kids until they got into school, and then I'd go back to my teaching. That's what I intended to do. So yeah, we were in a new place, and all of a sudden I went into the world, and because they were 2.5 right then, in Virginia, they will let you do public school, or they did at that point, maybe they still do, at age 2. So you can overlap, usually it's age 3, but you can always do more as a state. And so they actually said, you can start public education at age 2. And because we were...
Is this because they had a diagnosis?
Yeah.
This is for special ed, not for
special, exactly. Like
right.
They could have done early intervention until age 3, but because we were so close to being 3 for child find anyway, we just kind of zipped into the world of special ed and IEPs right then. And we actually thank Miles for having a speech impediment, because if he hadn't been so behind in talking, and he wouldn't have tested so low that he wouldn't have gotten into special ed, same as Ben. And they put them both into this self-contained, preschool class where we met a lot of great people. And it turned out that Miles and another kid named Bradley, who were late talkers, were in that class. And it was almost like this, what I guess you'd call reverse mainstreaming. And they didn't kick them out when they started talking. It was fantastic, because Miles and this kid Bradley were basically typically developing peers, and the teachers noticed that everybody else was like doing better, becoming more verbal or engaged or communicative, just having those 2 typically developing peers, truly,
right.
even though they weren't supposed to be. They
right.
just had been late talkers. And so they stayed in that classroom that whole year. And then they were kicked out, and they wanted to keep Ben. And I'm like, no, wait a second. So that's when we got them into Head Start at Virginia Commonwealth University Child Development Center. And that was amazing. So that's why, if it hadn't been for Miles, we were actually saying, no, can you keep Miles in that class? Because everything's going great. So we were actually pushing for that. So it's a story of twins, in a way, that vaulted our family into the world of fighting for inclusion, not just for Ben, but kind of it turned out for everybody else too.
Right. So that makes sense. Yeah. Because I know you're big with inclusion, with helping families with that. And so now this all makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So now they're in school. Let's continue talking about that. So now they're split up, right? Now that they're putting Miles in Gen Ed, and
no,
we they're
actually
not.
That's what we did. They wanted to, but then we got
both
of them.
You asked for him to stay, and they said okay.
No, we actually said, why can't Ben go to Head Start?
Oh, okay. Oh, so Head Start is just regular Gen Ed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
And
thought
it
it
was
was
at
still some kind of a special program.
Yeah, it was amazing because it was at VCU, and this program had a waiting list, a mile long, years and years.
Mhm.
But in every class, there were 2 Head Start slots. And because they both had disabilities, there's a quota for Head Start that they have to have kids with disabilities. And we we weren't over income by much. Let me just tell you that. Some coaches don't get paid what basketball. So we were a young, couple with 3 kids. And so we were over by not too much, but still over. But there was also a quota for having over income kids too. So we just fit in there, and they got an amazing year when they were 3.5 to 4.5. And then we went back to their elementary school in Virginia Preschool Initiative, one of those government funded general ed preschools. Now, what was interesting is that when we went back for when they were 4.5, turning 5, they had never had a kid like Ben in one of those gen ed classes. They'd always had kids maybe visit a little bit
Right.
from the self-contained class that Ben and Miles had been in. Okay.
Right.
So Ben spent the whole year in wonderful Miss Phillips's class with Miles and all these other kids. And there was an aide who honestly gave a whole lot of attention to Ben. I mean, not like one-on-one aid. She helped the whole class, but a lot of her attention did go to Ben. It was beautiful. And after that school, Mary Munford in Richmond, Virginia, looked at this and said, why don't we just have all of the kids in the self-contained class split up they made another VPI class, and they had the awesome special ed teacher go between the 2, and they had an aide in each class to help, an extra aide to help support those kids with, pretty involved disabilities, high support needs. And it worked. And so that was my first, I didn't even advocate for that. It was just people saw something great happen. And it made a change for lots of kids because of our advocacy. Other people benefited, and that was probably one of the things that started me getting that really good feeling about it's worth it more than for just my kid. Like, look at this changes our community, and that community can change our society to become a more inclusive and accepting, and like to celebrate differences instead of segregate. Yeah.
So was he going over for just certain classes or for everything?
No, he was in the regular ed.
He just was.
He was
Okay.
in it from Head Start on. Like, it was
Okay.
only that 1 year, and he was with Miles, so I wouldn't even call it a fully self-contained class because
Right.
it was just so almost inclusive, because Miles and Bradley had such an impact on as being full members of that class. They just happened to not be as impacted, delayed as people thought, because they just sort of started talking right when they kind of got in.
That was my other question.
Yeah,
So
that's what.
was he could speak then? He could like fully speak?
No. So Miles ended up becoming better and better, at speaking. It took a while, and he still had some artic issues, but Ben did not have, I would say, reliable speech. Well, I will just say we were a floor time family. And I maintain that we will always be a floor time family because it's a philosophy. In fact, I spoke at a floor time convention in 2002, and I got to meet Temple Grandin at a floor time. We just went floor time all the way. People did say, oh, you've got to do ABA. And honestly, Ben had all these whatever skills they were talking about. He knew all his letters and numbers and everything. It was the back and forth. And so so we just, through a cousin of ours who kind of showed us how floor time worked. It was like, oh, that's our style. And that is actually, we could never have afforded ABA at all. And for that book, The Child with Special Needs by Greenspan, I picked it up. I especially read one chapter, I think with Dylan, who lines up cars, and I did this little experiment and it just worked. We were just on. I wasn't the greatest floor time mom. I wasn't able to do all the sessions you did per day, but honestly, Miles and Coleman were the best floor time brothers, and that's what siblings can do. So I will just say that we just sort of figured it out. Like, why are we going to the playground and swinging? Oh, to get that proprioceptive, we just did it as a family. And it was really so much about inclusion and following Ben's lead. He loved the water. And just because my husband's a swim coach, it doesn't mean that, you're always just sticking your kid in swimming. But we would go to that Tuckahoe YMCA in Richmond, Virginia, and he was so soothed by the deep pressure. And you do that with all the boys. We just did it always together. We did music therapy together as a family. It was very inclusive back there. So our whole lifestyle was about inclusion, and it wasn't easy. Ben was banging his head. He was so repetitive. We only watched VCRs. That was before you could toggle back and watch things again. Like we didn't watch TV for a long time. But we also figured out through following Ben's lead that he had perfect pitch. And that was how I especially really connected with him, and my husband right away after that. But, here I am, I've got degrees in music and conducting and everything. And I compose and I arrange. And then I finally realized, oh my gosh, how does this little 2.5-year-old have, like, what's going on? And he had to dumb it down for mommy, honestly, because I don't have perfect pitch. I've got great relative pitch, but he could just ring a doorbell and say what note it was. And I'd have my pitch pipe from my a cappella days at college, and I'd have to check. And finally, after a year or two, I was like, okay, my gosh, this kid just has it going on. So that's when I was able to really connect. And through floor time, we just worked on, instead of giving a reward for something unrelated, it was always just following his lead and getting those circles of communication going. And that's how he actually developed language, slowly but surely. But by the end of, by his teenage years, he could have real conversations, and somewhat entertaining conversations. Some of the Ben videos are kind of famous because of just the funny way, amazing way he would say things and his perspective on things. So, yeah.
I know he was on the swim team, no? Was he on the swim team in high school?
Yeah. Yes. Swim team first of all, in Knoxville, everybody seems to do summer league swimming. So that was
Hold on. So you were in Virginia. When did you move to Knoxville?
We moved to Knoxville 2005. And so, we had just gotten things going on inclusion wise and everything, because they even did kindergarten there, and had what turned into a great experience there. We came to Knoxville, and
not the same experience.
Well, I'm not saying we had changed some hearts and minds in Richmond, which was great. And here we were not quite starting over, because when you have an IEP that's an inclusive IEP, they have to try that out. But I will just say that was the start of a really huge advocacy push. I basically I didn't have a choice in my mind. I put my career to the side. I had to really keep advocating, sometimes fiercely, for, because they did not want Ben to succeed, because nobody else was being included. So he was the anomaly here. And not everyone. That's when we met some of the best, most wonderful people in our lives, teachers and some service providers. who got it and who were rooting for us and loved Ben and followed the law. You know, all we were asking for is just follow the law. But we basically had to fight against an entire system that was not following the law with really anyone in terms of the way least restrictive environment is supposed to be considered. I mean, they didn't even do it for preschool when it's right there in the law. They didn't think they had to. And I helped right that ship. Now they have fully inclusive preschool here. But I wrote a state complaint and that ended up finally in 2014, 15, because all these people kept asking me, well, how do you get this inclusion? We want what you're having. And I said, well, when did you sign your rights away? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, where did they go to preschool? And they said, oh, well, they went to special ed preschool here, but we do them privately 2 days a week. And I said, well, that's where Knox County schools got it wrong. And I finally got so tired of hearing everybody went to this special ed preschool, and that was against the law for them to not consider an inclusive setting. You don't have to make an inclusive preschool, but you do have to subsidize like for private school or Head Start. See, something like Head Start would be, that's what Richmond did. Or that VP, you know, the Virginia Preschool Initiative, VPI program. So I came here and I had an inclusive IEP that nobody else had. And I wasn't going to give that up. Now, again, that a lot of this has to do with the fact that they were twins. And it's a different path if you've got one child, let's say, like look at Jody's, you know, if you've got an older sister and then a kid with autism and then a younger brother. Well, that one is just moving like its little independent thing. And for instance, Jody's, you know, Michael went to Montessori middle school. Well, but that's because he was going to be kind of on his own in middle school anyway, but not my kids because, you know, I had Ben and Miles. And so they were going to stick together or else it would have looked obviously different. And so, again, I credit a lot of our inclusion path to the fact that we had twins and it just was going to be our philosophy that they were going to stick together because we saw that Ben helped everybody. You know, if he came with an aide, then other kids got help in the class. If he was on a team, everybody got a better understanding of what should happen in our society by including all people. And yeah, that's sort of just the way we went along. And yes, in high school was great. He was on the swim team. And then he actually even went to the University of Tennesse Future Program. And that was for 4 years, same as Miles going to Savannah College of Art and Design for 4 years. So just whatever, even though it was a 2-year program, you could go for 4 years. And because Miles was going to college for 4 years, you know, Ben was like, okay, college is 4 years. Whereas if it's just one kid, they wouldn't maybe know the difference if they just went to a program for 2 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he was on the swim team just with all of everybody else from the high school, I guess. Was Miles on the swim team? Did he swim
Yes.
too?
Yes, and Miles swam in college, and Coleman. So SCAD is NAIA, and Miles went there for music and sound design, and then Coleman swam Division I at Duke. So they're all swimmers. I was never a swimmer, but boy, it keeps teenage boys clean, that chlorine. You got to feed them a lot, but it keeps them clean and tired. And yeah, and no, the injuries, like you've all got your own lane and water's pretty kind to you. So yeah, I love swimming. I just never did it myself.
Nice. So let's talk about how you help other parents now with inclusion. What are you doing now?
Well, it's actually, I'm sort of retired now from going to IEP meetings, but I will just say I went to, and this was all as a volunteer. I just got it in my soul, I guess, that, and I think it was because I was treated so terribly, and I mean personally terribly, like really badly. Like I was sort of just lied about, and they were just scared, I guess. But that's also how a lot of people got to really support Ben and then other kids, was just saying, wait a second, she's not, terrible. Look at this family, and look at this awesome kid, Ben, and his brothers, and oh, this can work. So I just remembered thinking it was hard to go through this alone, obviously with my awesome husband, but he was busy at University of Tennesse as a head coach, here for an amazing program. They're building a new pool, and now he's got Olympians like crazy. And that was in 2005 when he just came to work with the women's team, the Lady Vols. And after that, he took over the men's. They wanted to combine the programs, so they sort of promoted him to take over both programs, which he still does today. I just remember thinking, well, Ben shouldn't be the only one. And anyone who asks me, I will help. And I'll even tell some people like Jody, well, he's actually supposed to be getting this. And, just let me know if you ever want to pursue that. So I just got, I guess, a reputation to the point where awesome teachers and service providers were like slipping parents and even administrators slipping parents my number and just say, hey, I can't say this at an IEP meeting, but this lady will do it, and she doesn't even charge. So it became an unfortunate hobby, I like to call it. And I would have always said music is the most important thing in my life, and I just love music. And it was kind of a hard reality when it occurred to me very early on that this was more important, which is tough because as a musician, and that was put it this way, I got really good at doing something I didn't want to do when I could have done something I love to do pretty well. I could have just kept teaching. I could have just done that. And I did go towards the inclusive arts. I did a whole exceptional orchestra, which was inclusive. A third of the kids had disabilities, and it was just to show arts integration. And of course, you can do that in school, tie music and arts and dance and theater to the general curriculum. And personally, I think that's how school might be better taught for the masses, but that's just my own bent. But going into IEP meetings is just no fun. It's traumatic for a lot of people. And so when I came, I tended to draw a crowd. Sometimes there'd be 10 people, sometimes 15 people from the school district. Yeah. And they're like,
do you feel that they were there to oppose you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, when I'd show up, it would be, they couldn't get it. They couldn't just use their usual rigmarole to, tell the parents, no, he has to keep up, so he can't be in the general ed class. I'm like, that's not true. You don't have to keep up. You can have modifications to the general curriculum, that like Ben had. He got a special ed diploma, but he took all the courses, or I should say, and he took all the courses, including French, German, Spanish, marine ecology, all the Englishes, all the maths, personal finance, U.S. government, everything, but with modifications to the general curriculum so that he could access the general curriculum. And that just showed that was just the law. We weren't looking for any frills or bells and whistles. It was just, hey, you just need to be able to progress in your IEP goals and gain access to the general curriculum. And that is being educated. And so who spoke the most French in France? Miles or Coleman, who had honors French courses, or Ben? Oh, that would be Ben Kredich, who spoke the most French when we went to Europe in 2017 when the twins graduated. It's like you're not doing it for like, ooh, look at what he can do. It's just everybody has a right to be educated, and that was the path that legally he should have been on, and we made sure he was. So it shouldn't have been so hard.
Right. I guess that's sort of like saying, oh, well, he can't get A's in that class, so he doesn't deserve to be in the class.
It's more like, yeah, he can't do that work. He could never. It's like, well, you don't have to. If you're on alternate assessment, the first consideration is to be in the regular ed class with modifications to the curriculum And I'll tell you that I know because I've seen you interview spellers, and that is my biggest push right now, because before spellers become spellers, that's the importance of presuming competence. And in the law, that is actually what should be done. You should be able to access the general curriculum unless there's solid data that shows you can't. And there just isn't if you know about apraxia. And Michael's a great example of, as Jody said, they didn't presume competence, but they presumed his educational rights. And so because he was in the general classroom all the way through high school, and at UT, Michael was in the UT Future Program also, he learned everything. It wasn't until he was 25 that he began to spell, and that came to be, Jody will always credit me with that. And I'm like, I am just a vessel. I wouldn't have known about that if it hadn't been for Peyton, a young man named Peyton, and then who had no words, and then a young man named Cole who did have words, who sounded kind of like Michael, maybe scripting some his schedule or something, but he's spelling out, don't listen to what I'm saying, listen to what I'm spelling. And so I had advocated for Peyton for so long, for I think 5 years now, and without attorneys. Remember, I'm not an attorney, and I do work closely with some attorneys who, when I can't help a family just through the IEP process, I'll sort of say, well, I can't take you any further, and pitch your case to these attorneys who have had remarkable success and made wonderful case law for inclusion, and many other aspects of IDEA and ADA. But it's really that access to the general curriculum that Peyton did not have. He was in a life skills, which you're not even supposed to have, class up until 5th grade. And they discovered spelling to communicate, I think, in the middle of 4th grade, but then it got it going, and he still wasn't, on the keyboard, but he was open. And the parents are hearing him say, hey, I really want to be in general ed, like I want to learn. And they
Right.
were sort of, their minds were blown, and they're thinking yes. And so they contacted me, and I mostly worked sort of behind the scenes in the initial stages to just say, well, this is ADA. You've got your right to your preferred method of communication. And we got that middle school to give it a try. And it was because, especially of one teacher and one administrator who believed in him. And there were a lot of people not wanting to believe in him, like folks from the ASHA world and everything. But it was so clear. It was obvious. It was like bonked you over the head. It was so obvious. It was,
Right.
of course, him spelling his thoughts and answers and whatnot. And that's carried over. Now he's on the keyboard. And it's beautiful. So what should have happened is he should have been in the regular ed classroom all the way from preschool to 5th grade, even if people didn't know that he could understand, because that's the least dangerous assumption. And that's basically presuming competence. He would have gotten all that learning, that access, and he's totally on track for a regular ed diploma. Somehow he just amazingly just caught up. And he even typed to me, I said, Peyton, tell me about that class through 5th grade. He said, Kim, we started each day doing childish activities. And he said, I longed for the door of the general ed class to be open so I could hear what they were learning. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So it just truly speaks to the importance of following the basics of the law, which even if a student has, significant high support needs, doesn't have the communication, you cannot presume that they don't understand everything. And kids like Peyton and Cole and Michael, and I could name a ton, are showing the world that. And it's interesting to see the reactions to that. Sometimes it takes a lot for the Grinch's heart to grow 2 times that day. But I think it's
Yes.
happening.
So I
it's
think
happening.
this is important, you know, as we're progressively learning about spelling to communicate and everything, that to find out they really are in there, you know, to presume that competence. So parents need to know to do this. You're going to have to fight to get your kids to be able to be in classrooms where they can actually learn instead of being treated like babies. you
Yes.
know.
It's torture, I believe, just from the spellers I've listened to be treated like a toddler. And they've got all these thoughts and ideas, and that's all that's cognitively, and the regions of the brain that take it in Wernicke's and Broca's and all that.
Yep.
It's in here, that I liken it to you're in a car. You get in a car, you know how to drive, and you know where you're going, you know how to get there. What if the car doesn't work? What if what if there's no gas? Well, it's not because you don't know how to drive and how to get there. It's you've got no gas, or you go onto icy roads and you go this way and the car goes that way, or you put on the brakes and instead of that you end up going faster, or you put on the gas and all of a sudden everything stops. Like it must feel, boy, talk about theory of mind. Let's put ourselves in a situation where even like when you get, when you go to the dentist and you get numbing medicine and you're like biting your lip and you're like, I can't feel this, hello, why can't we understand what that's like? Why can't we just even try to imagine and then simply provide what the law requires, which is they get access to the general curriculum, and you just can't, who would want to prove that they really didn't have this capacity and potential? And so, yeah, I really have this huge new, especially with Michael having, at age 25, to see your kid's best friend find his voice.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
remarkable.
Yeah. Did Ben ever use spelling or no?
No, he never did, though. Boy, that kid could spell forwards and backwards, and photographic memory, perfect auditory memory, perfect pitch. So yeah, he never did, but I feel like he always straddled the world of non-speakers and speakers, because every kid's different, and he just developed that language. And I'm not going to say it was reliable up until even, he could talk about really philosophical things, especially with his twin, but it was a long time coming. But he did not, I'm sure, would get in sound loops. He definitely would say, I'm getting stuck in sound loops, and he'd want us to say things a certain way or whatever. But he never used spelling, and it turned out, he was able to really, really communicate really well, and quite entertainingly too. And to the point where he was working as assisted living centers as a pianist. And
he played piano.
Oh yeah. And he had his whole repertoire, and his bow tie with a piano, and he'd like be all dressed up, and they called him the piano man. And he would actually introduce songs, even make a few jokes and everything. So yeah, they loved him. They absolutely loved him. Yeah.
Cute. What happens next? What are you doing now?
Well, now I'm really working to advocate for, I've got I should bring, can I go run and get a sweatshirt?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. 2 friends of mine, well, plus Jody, and Michael is going to be an expert, and also Peyton, and whoever else wants to be, about the importance of access to the general curriculum through modified curriculum, like not an alternative curriculum, but the general curriculum modified to wherever they need to be. Even for Michael, he did all these modifications as body engagers, with the whole spelling. Like now he does little, like he's answering these amazing math questions, but he's doing stickers, or other spellers listen to a whole video just to keep their body regulated. So it's almost like modified content can be like body engagers. The important thing is for people who who are in there and maybe can't show it to be able to access the general curriculum. And so you can do that legally under IDEA through modifications to the general curriculum. You know, they can't expect you to write maybe 5 essays until you have a reliable communication. But while you're getting that, or even if you never get it, you still get to be educated, and you should be in that general education classroom or accessing it, even if you need breaks, even if you need to be videoing, like watching the classroom from a room because, you know, your stimming is whatever your body needs to do. So we've come up with, I don't know if you can see this, but it's called
Mods
Mods
All
All Day.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's a Facebook page, and it's just called Mods All Day. And we are just starting to put it out there, basically saying, this is why, under the law, you should be able to access the general curriculum through modifications to the general curriculum if you need it. So that while you're gaining, like imagine a Michael who we didn't presume competence necessarily, but we presumed his educational rights, and he remembers everything from his entire schooling because he was in there. Whereas Peyton switched to general education classes in the general curriculum after 5th grade, but he should have been listening to everything and gaining those inclusive opportunities all the way before that. So it's a tale of two spellers, and I'm going to put that out there pretty soon, with Michael and Peyton being the experts. Like, hear it from them, how much it meant to them. And Michael has already shared some awesome perspectives of just why it was so important to him. And yes, his body might not have cooperated in terms of being able to show what he knew, but he learned everything. So that's what I'm up to now, is Mods All Day. And
Okay.
you know,
All right. So people can join that Facebook page if they want to get on there, and they can be in touch with you on there, because you're going to be the admin of the page, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And if they have questions, they can ask on there.
Absolutely. We're just starting it out. We've actually gotten, you know, friends of ours to just, like, we're saying, hey, we're putting this out slowly because we want to make sure that it's very specific to modifying the curriculum so that everyone can access the general curriculum with their typically developing peers with supports. Because what we've found is that all these kids are just shuttled to a separate class. And what you're hearing now is, if only I could have just listened and been in there and listened to what everybody else was learning. And so, you know, this wasn't my beginning ever purpose of advocating, but it just takes this path. And spelling, it was because of Peyton, advocating for Peyton, that then I learned about Cole. And then, you know, Michael got to, I mean, his world is completely opened up, and he's got the best family in the world. And he was, as Jody said, shared on your podcast, he was tortured. He was sad. And he had these great friends. And I think Ben was one of those friends who's still with him. I'm 100% sure of that. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, working on the documentary and just continuing to advocate for systemic change in our school district and in Tennessee and across the nation, because IDEA is it's a work of art. And ADA too. And ADA.
What do those stand for?
Okay, Americans with Disabilities Act is actually what spelling would fall under.
Right.
Because under ADA, you are entitled to your preferred method of communication. So it's ADA is Americans with Disabilities Act, and that goes through your whole life. But IDEA goes through just the educational, there's early intervention, and then there's age 3 through 12th grade up till somebody's 22. You're under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so that is your entitlement to being educated. And part of that is with, of course, a full range of supplementary supports, services. It really covers a lot. And you're entitled to be educated to the maximum extent possible through modifications, accommodations, support services, anything with your typically developing peers. And so modifications to the general curriculum can be the pathway to inclusion of, they should be, all these spellers so that they can be in those classrooms, even with body engagers that are materials, like let's say they're doing something on fossils. Okay, well, maybe due to apraxia, you have a different looking worksheet, or you've got an aide who's helping you, even just as long as you're listening and taking it in. And that's the essence of being educated, because until people with apraxia get their reliable form of communication, why would you deny them the education? If we had duct tape over our mouths and our hands behind our back, that doesn't mean I can't learn about parts of a cell and the Civil War and algebra and everything. And that's the way we have got to think about it, is do this to us, duct tape our mouths and put our hands behind our back and our toes can't type, and then see how much we can show. But are we learning it? Yes. And so that the hope is very much alive, that through spelling, the different methods out there, we're hearing from the spellers themselves how important.
So like a loophole or something where we can bypass people like Asha that are blocking it from getting into schools, and to use these disability acts to say that any means that they can use to learn should be allowed. Have you
So
about that?
I don't think that Asha is what's happened, in my view. And again, I'm not an attorney, but when we had this speech therapist who actually did this research in the 80s upon which Asha's position statement is based, and she's just, my gosh, the closed-mindedness, everyone else in the room can see it, believes it. And we finally, the parents sort of, and the team voted her off the IEP team. But that took a long time. And I don't think Asha has they shouldn't be sticking their nose in IEPs and kids' education. I just don't quite understand why they're given so much power. I get it, because they're speech language pathologists, but sometimes you can go through the OT route for independent typing. Honestly, Cindy, it comes down to, you got to see it to believe it. And I think the more, get it in front of a judge with somebody like Michael, who is so clearly very precise, very not slow at it, but he's just like you or I would be, poking letters like this with that once people see it and hear what he's saying, that he'll say something that his mom doesn't want to hear him say, maybe because it's something that she was like, I thought you liked Disney all this time, and it's like, you're saying what? Oh my gosh, you just have to see it to believe it. And I think when families take this to due process, which I know some are, and I'm involved in that side of things just as an advocate, that's when you're going to see the change. Is you've got to have some case law behind there, because right now it's in such its little infancy in terms of it being in the schools, like with a Peyton. Okay, that took 5 years, and he's in high school now, and he has it in his IEP to have an S2C trained CRP. And that was a Herculean effort right there. But once that happens, and also you're seeing people in colleges. I know a young woman, Grace, who's at Belmont College studying neuro something or other, and absolutely brilliant. And it's that the earth ain't flat, but you got to sail around the world with somebody and say, see, I made it all the way back. So
Right.
they got to see it. So I don't think it's as much a loophole as it's got to just be seen.
Well, how'd you get it in the IEP? That's what I want to know. How did you get this S2C into somebody's IEP?
Well, that was interesting, because it was, teacher and honestly an administrator who weren't doing anything, but like the school gave them the chance, and the speech therapist said, this is junk science, it won't work. And then of course it did work. And she just kept digging in her heels. And it was like everybody else in the room, even some of the people who I wouldn't consider the, the good witches of the world, like they maybe have had some bad practices in this district. They saw it for themselves. And it's nice to see. That's what I mean. That's why I have faith
So
in a
did the
lot of
kid have to
ways.
show up to the IEP meeting and spell in front of people?
He did, and so did another. It's that they saw in school that he was doing it with aides. They said they would train aides, and even though it wasn't perfect and it came with a lot of bumps, he just showed them, well, yeah, he's just communicating. So you can't unsee that. And then to say, okay, we need to put this specifically in the IEP because we can't just depend on training any random aid. It takes a lot. So yeah, I do have a great hope. This is an exciting time because of so much attention now. And it depends on catching a kid also at the right time for a case to maybe go to court. Now, nobody wants to go to court, and Peyton's parents not had to go to court. It was a really good collaborative, sometimes bumpy road effort, and Peyton being the best advocate of everyone. But in terms of, look at Michael McIntyre, age 25 before he found spelling and was able to find a reliable form of communication. Well, he's not eligible under IDEA anymore. That tossed out at age 22. So, and if you're so young, it might be you're just in the beginning stages. And I think it probably takes, I don't want to speak, misspeak, but from my experience, a little kid has a lot of sensory stuff going on and a lot of things needing to regulate, just like any typical kid who's 5, 7. To catch somebody in a sweet spot of discovering spelling to communicate, having maybe been in a life skills class,
Right.
and then say, and then the parent proposes this, and then the school district says no because ASHA, that's when, if you've got a parent who's willing to go the distance and say, I want public education and I want, I want my kid, and my kid wants to be part of the school and part of general ed and be seen and teach other people, that's when you're going to get some cases going up through the administrative law judge and to district court and maybe the Court of Appeals. And that's when I think ASHA is going to have its little comeuppance, because I don't think anybody's really challenged ASHA as a entity. Then you get a kid up on the stand spelling, and it's up to a judge or a jury, if it's an ADA, like.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we need. feel like somebody needs to get to that point so that we get a breakthrough.
We're
And then
getting there.
once that happens, then the floodgates will start opening.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything, but there's stuff happening,
Good.
which is why I'm so optimistic.
Good.
And it's too bad that it takes, going to court to do it, but I'll try anything to avoid, for any family to avoid going to court, administrative complaint, you name it. But at a certain point, if there's a case that's ripe for the picking, and because a school district puts in writing, why not? And they have to put in writing why they're refusing a proposal from the parent. And when they put, because ASHA says so, that's when you've got yourself a case.
I would sue ASHA if I was the parent.
Well, that's the thing. You've got to, I'm no attorney, but if that's what the school district is going on, then they've just basically said ASHA is the reason we're not doing it. And so ASHA's got some splaining to do.
Yeah. And all they have to do is pull down their stupid statement. That's all they have to do.
I know. There's a lot riding on their statement, I think, as you know.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot. I'd like to think the best of anybody and any organization. I love, just all that related service providers do. But when somebody's getting in the way of, because they refuse to open their minds to new possibilities, like I say, I love being wrong. I never assume that I'm right about anything until I'm really boy, I've really seen it. So I just like learning more. I would say not being wrong about something, but give me something and I just will embrace it.
It's just frustrating when you find out that they're standing in the way of so many kids learning how to spell. And then you talk to somebody like Michael that says spelling saved his life.
Yes. His is going to be, that's why I'm so excited for him to be one of our experts on mods all day, because he's 25, almost 26, and he can say what he feels through the letterboard. And it's so obvious. You know, I think that people, if there are a lot of different spellers, we're all different. We have different styles of doing everything, right? And if you've got somebody going really like this and this and this and not looking because they're using peripheral vision, well, it's easier for us muggles, I call us, right? When we see a very steady, like we would do it, very slow and steady, and I just think, okay, he wants to advocate, and he's got all the tools to advocate. He's got the passion, and he knows how important it is to have that education access, and then get that spelling, especially through the schools. My gosh, it would be a huge, let's face it, it takes a lot. It's not just one, you know, oh, here it is. Here's, now you can spell one day when we just put a letterboard in front of you. It's not that, because guess what? If it were that easy, they could just have used something like a typewriter or something.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for part 1. Be sure to tune in for part 2. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.